Hello, void dwellers. This is Yasser Arafat. He was the head of the PLO terror group and later in life, following the Oslo Accords between Israel and the PLO, became the president of the Palestinian Authority, a semi-autonomous regime that was created by those accords. For decades, Arafat called himself a Palestinian, and when he committed or sent others to commit horrific acts of murder and terror, he said it was in the name of his fight for freedom as a Palestinian. But here's the thing. Arafat was an Egyptian. He was born in Cairo. He grew up in Egypt. He went to King Fuad's University in Cairo. And for many years, he and his father both tried to make the Egyptian authorities recognize a piece of land they claimed belonged to his family for generations. In Egypt, he's an Egyptian. So how can he be a Palestinian? Well, he identified as a Palestinian. It was the first time in modern history when someone did that. Now the thing is, he didn't identify as a Palestinian until later in his life. At first, he was captivated by Arab nationalism, a political movement not unlike Zionism in many ways, but surrounded around the Arab ethnicity, obviously, rather than the Jewish one. It started in the late 19th century, much like Zionism, as an independence movement in the Arab world, challenging the Ottoman Empire, which at the time ruled most of the Middle East. Then, after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed and the West grabbed pieces of the Middle East to itself, with Britain taking the area known at the time as Palestine, Arab nationalism became a fight against the West. And it became a movement against Jewish independence as well. Because the area that was the Jewish historic homeland, Arabs felt was Arab land, since it was occupied during the Arab invasion of the 7th century. So early in his life, Arafat does not refer to himself as a Palestinian. In fact, back in those days, in the early 20th century, anyone who lived in the area was considered a Palestinian. See, Palestine is not the name of a country or a kingdom or anything like that. It's not a political entity. It's a Greek-Roman name of a region. It's like saying you are Middle Eastern or European. It's not a nationality. In fact, my own grandmother from my mother's side was born in 1921 in Jerusalem and was issued a Palestinian passport by the British Mandate. So in that sense, I'm a Palestinian, more so than the late Yasser Arafat. But back then, the identity of Palestinians didn't exist. There were Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews, and there were other types of Palestinians. The conflict wasn't between Palestine, which never existed as a country, as a political entity, and Israel, which wasn't founded yet. The conflict was between Arabs and Jews. See, the Palestinians were the first people in modern history to just come out one day and identify as something that they were just factually not. They invented this entire completely made-up identity, pretty much like saying they identified as a forest elf, and started using it to make themselves seem disenfranchised and persecuted, when in fact they were a huge majority, and it was them who tried to disenfranchise and persecute a minority. There was never a country or a kingdom by that name. There was never an ethnicity by that name. The truth is that the Jews had a better claim to the region, since Judea was an historic kingdom twice, and it's where Jews are from. And that's why the West originally supported the Zionist movement. Unlike what people think these days, it wasn't because of the Holocaust. It was way before that. In 1922, the League of Nations, the organization that preceded the UN before World War II, accepted the Balfour Declaration from 1917 into the mandate of Palestine. The Balfour Declaration was a formal declaration by the Brits that says they accept the Jews' claim to their homeland in the area known as Palestine. And by approving it, the League of Nations repeated that acceptance and made it even deeper and larger. Long before the Holocaust, the world realized the only ones with true claim to Judea, the kind of hint is in the name, are the natives, the Jews. So the Arabs, who saw that as a huge defeat, felt they needed some other strategy to gain global support. This was never about freeing an oppressed people. It was about Arab nationalism and Arab control over the entire region. By the way, at the time, it wasn't even about Islam really. It was Arab nationalism. Lebanon had a Christian majority and they supported the Arab side too. In Syria, Christians were like 20 or 30% of the population and they supported Arab nationalism too. It wasn't a religious conflict to begin with. It was an ethnical conflict. The religion got injected into it later. It was a conflict between a persecuted minority wanting to go back home and have self-determination and a huge majority of 500 million people telling them, no, we conquered it centuries ago, the Turks took it from us, and now that the Turks are gone, we want it back, so you can't have it. Which is why, in the beginning, the struggle against Zionism didn't look anything like it does today. Nobody was talking about a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Hell, Jerusalem was occupied by the Ottomans for centuries, and no one turned it into a capital, or indeed into even more than just a stop on your way to other more important places. Then in 1948, Jordan took over what is cruelly named around the world as the West Bank, which is the name the Jordanians gave the region. Because from their perspective, it's on the West Bank of the Jordan River. But in truth, that area is Judea and Samaria. Anyway, when Jordanians ruled over the area from 1948 till 1967, no one talked about a Palestinian state. They had half of Jerusalem. They didn't make it into a capital either. Nobody cared about it. And in the Gaza Strip, they were under the Egyptian military rule, and still no one rebelled. No one called it an open-air prison. No one was calling for free Palestine. Because that narrative wasn't invented until the 1960s, and specifically after the 6 Days War in 1967. After which Israel took control over the so-called West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That's when the narrative changed. That's when the Arabs saw their chance, saw their opportunity to gain the Western world's sympathy. And Israel played right into their hands. The plan was simple. See, the Jordanians did give the people who lived in the so-called West Bank Jordanian citizenship, unlike the way Egypt ruled over the Gaza Strip as a military occupation. And the people there were really citizens of the now collapsed Ottoman Empire, so they were in fact without a country. But the people in the West Bank weren't like that at all. They were Jordanians. But the moment Israel took over the region, they completely turned their backs on those people and said, no, they are not part of us. They are now Palestinians under Israeli occupation. And bam! The Palestinian identity and narrative were born. And it worked! A bit too well, actually, since many Arab countries like Saudi Arabia would have loved to just forget about the whole thing and normalize relations with Israel, but they can't. They are kind of locked into their own scam now. And an effective scam it has been. Everybody fell for it. For Westerners, it played into their prejudice against Jews as villainous people. For liberals, it played into their vanity. I include myself in that group. I fell for it too. Throughout my adult life, I totally bought the whole Palestinian identity trick, and I tried to be understanding and compassionate about it and supported enthusiastically the two-state solution. I was your loudmouth, know-it-all leftist. I protested, I wrote about it, I considered myself a peace activist. But all the while, I didn't realize, or I didn't want to realize, that there was something very sinister behind that narrative. It was specifically designed to victimize people, to victimize children, in order to gain sympathy and have justification for every kind of horror imaginable. I didn't realize that the narrative, this made-up identity, was created specifically to not have peace, ever, to not compromise, to not coexist. The entire point of the narrative is a never-ending war against the Jews. And the only way that war would finally end is if the narrative ends is if we stop accepting the false identity. And even in spite of all of this, personally, I would still agree to a kind of a two-state solution if I thought it would bring to rest this conflict once and for all, partly because I want us separated from them once and for all. I don't want them working in Israel. I don't want us controlling them. I don't want us responsible for them. I want them out of our lives for good. But for me, to support a Palestinian state at this point, it would have to meet some very, very tempting conditions for us. Like, it has to be a demilitarized country, obvious, I think, especially after the 7th of October. And we have to have control over media and education to eradicate antisemitism. At the moment, Palestinian society is a death cult. They are the most horrific anti-Semitic thing on the planet. And Arab nations must all accept Israel and normalize relations and demonstrate true effort to fight anti-Semitism at their own countries and to roll back decades of incitement and lies. And I would also demand from the West that Israel joins NATO and that it is NATO soldiers who guard the borders, so that when the Palestinians break the agreement, and they will, because that's the entire purpose of the narrative that created them, it would be those fine Westerners who have to deal with it. And they won't be able to lie about us anymore. And of course I would insist with all of that we still have the right to protect ourselves when we need to. I would also enter into the agreement a condition that says that for every violent violation of the agreement from the Palestinian side, Israel is entitled to annexing a piece of the Palestinian state. Because while we care about life, they care about land. So that's how we should penalize violent violations. You kill Jews, you lose land. That's the equation. And the entire world has to agree to that. Only under these conditions would I support the two-state solution at this point. But regardless of this, and let's face it, that would never happen, we must start by rejecting this made-up identity once and for all. There is no such thing as a Palestinian people. There never was. The very acceptance of this narrative is anti-Semitic. It's a narrative created to do only one thing, to justify the murder of Jews, to gain world sympathy for their ultimate objective, which is destroying the Jewish state and murdering or forcefully displacing the 8 million Jews who live there. We must start calling a spade a spade. Pro-Palestinians are not humanists, and they are not in it for human rights. They are not liberals, they are not even leftists, really. They are simply neo-Nazis, able to support their hatred in the guise that was provided to them by the made-up Palestinian identity. And so they must be exposed for what they are and fought as such.